Welcome, everyone. I'm Karen Trivette. I am the senior co-chair of the SAA section on International Archival Affairs. And this is episode number 1 of this year for Archival Landscapes seminars. So on behalf of the Society of American Archivists and the International Archival Affairs section leadership, welcome to this installment. The Archival Landscapes virtual seminar series actually began in 2020. In each seminar, an international guest speaker or speakers introduces audiences to the issues and advancements in their local context while describing the history, operating environment, and unique aspects of archival practice in their country. For today's seminar, we're going to have a real drill down and actually hear from an archivist who can testify to his experience on the international stage. So we're very happy for that opportunity. Those aforementioned housekeeping points, please mute your microphones if you haven't already and close your video transmission to free up the bandwidth. And feel free to write any questions in the chat box, and we will address those if possible at the end of today's program. We're going to allow about 15 to 20 minutes for questions, so do populate the chat box. So, our esteemed guest in conversation with me today is Monsieur Henri Zuber, currently the president of the French Protestantism Historical Society. Welcome to you, Monsieur Zuber. I will again pause our conversation when we have about 15 minutes remaining and then segue to Q&A. But for now, let's chat. All right, if you will, please tell our audience how you became an archivist and what sort of training did you experience on your path to becoming an archivist?
Well, dear colleagues, I'm extremely honored to meet with you and to go over a 40-year career, which started in the early 1980s. I trained as an archivist in a very classical way for France. I graduated from the Ecole des Chartes, which was then considered the only way to reach the top echelons of the archival career within the French civil service. Luckily, this has evolved a lot, and which is great because I mean it allows for a diversity of training paths and just enriches the profession generally. But back then, the only conservateur were the ones who had gone through the École des Chartes. And this lasted, I would say, till about the 1990s. This was a very theoretical training based on learning what we call the auxiliary historical sciences, paleography, sigillography, diplomatics, and in a way it prepared us extremely well intellectually. Did it prepare us fully to face the challenges of records and archives in modern administration or modern businesses? Well, as in all professions, we start out with a theoretical framework, and then we learn in the field. So this is what the experience I went through, as probably most of you did. My first working experience was actually in a library. I started that since in France we have, after our university studies, we have to we had to until 1995 we had to do our national service. I was recruited by the director of the Maison Française in Oxford to help run the library. So in a way, I learned early on how to dialogue with colleagues from libraries who usually also hold huge amounts of archives, and it was a rather fascinating experience. Not to mention having an extra 2 years in a way as a student, living the life of the new professional, but continuing in the student experience. So that's the way I started out before moving on to my first jobs, which were in the French administration. One of the points about my career, is that I maintained a career without moving from Paris. I went from administration archives, central administration archives, local administration archives, business archives, but was always based in Paris, which is a peculiarity within the profession. Most of the conservateurs, I mean, the people who are trained to be civil servants, usually develop parcours while going through departmental archives, so going through the archives of the local units. France is divided into 95 départements, and heading, or first becoming second in command and heading the archives in the services in those territories. So that's something I didn't do, which makes me a bit of an oddity in the French profession. What I was a pioneer in, however, was, and I say this very modestly, was working and deciding to work in business archives. And when I joined the Paris Transport Authority, the RATP, in 1990, there had been just 2 colleagues who had from the Ecole des Chartes who had just done a similar path. And well, the peculiarity of this job was that it was still considered as within the state administration, since RATP is 100% government owned. Still is, I think, even though competition is now being introduced through European regulations, both at the national and local level. But so this is, and the interest of actually joining a company was having this particular aspect of having records and archives being managed in-house. That means not having a transfer of documents from whichever administration to the national or the departmental archives, but having them part of the same, still of the same body, and as such being still considered as close to the company itself. I don't see if this is clear, but in a way that's one of the great difficulties that we archivists are facing. And I will use the term archives in the sense of both records and archives, because that's how we French express it. We talk about archives courantes, current archives, which are records, archives intermédiaires, intermediary archives, and archives définitives. I mean, and these the interest of working within a company was in a way to helping people see the whole chain, from records to archives, and helping them understand that what is kept at the end of the whole process is not worthless papers that will just have to be piled up and eventually thrown away, but that in a way, if they just take care of the process at the beginning for efficiency measures and for running the company better, they will, at the end of the day, with a proper appraisal system, end up with a limited amount of documents that are being conserved for historical purposes and for study purposes. I would have to say that I had a heart-wrenching experience when I joined RATP. 2 years before I joined, the company had thrown away all the personnel files of the coachmen who were actually driving the omnibuses throughout Paris. They just had the empty folders left, and the whole content had been thrown away because they were all documents of no value. And I just told them that they had just killed part of the company's memory.
Gosh.
So that there was nothing I could do. All I could do was make sure the archives of the motor bus drivers, the machinists, and all the people driving the metros would be perfectly kept, and they are in a way. The big advantage being that in a company like the RATP, I was able to apply the principle that you keep the files of all personnel. In the French administration, and this was applied throughout the 19th century, you only kept the files of the worthy staff. That means the managers, and all the rank and file somehow, or there were maybe there was a bit of sampling, but hardly any. So at the RATP, we have the files, and we've managed to keep them of all staff members from the early 20th century to nowadays. And this has been used for long demographical studies and on the origins of the people, on the recruitment processes. There was a seminar that was initiated by the Cultural Affairs Direction of the Parisian area in the 1990s, and it led to a number of studies that were based on these archives. So this was a great experience, really. Just working at RATP and having interesting the both the staff and the people in charge in the value of what the documents contained in terms of historical comprehension of transport in the Parisian area. And there were subjects that have been studied, like how did a city like Paris manage with a fleet of or a group of 3,000 to 4,000 horses, just for the omnibuses, not to mention all the private, so there was probably double the amount. How do you just take care of them, send them out to farms to rest when they've just every so often? So this was an amazing subject. But the whole adventure of the Parisian metro can also be studied not so much through the archives of the RATP, but through the archives of the city of Paris, because it was a 50-year procrastination, building up the metro in Paris, because there was a great fear of the city council of Paris of being somehow controlled by the 5 train companies that had divided up France, and they didn't want those train companies to enter past the actual stations where their trains arrived. And so the Paris metro was only inaugurated at some point during the World Fair of 1900. It was an event that went nearly unnoticed, but within a decade it had become an immense success. in spite of some terrible accidents, but
Mm.
the 1903 accident de Couronne, which killed 80 people, was one of them. But and it forced the company to just not have rolling stock made only of wood.
Oh, right.
And to review its security procedures. But the metro was a great success from its start, and especially during World War II was the only means of transportation. So it was extremely, you have this notion of the last metro, but that meant something. It still means something probably nowadays for a number of Parisians, but back then it was you had to just beat the curfew. So it was,
wow.
so no, that was a great experience working at the RATP.
I have a quick question, if I may. In some information you shared with me in advance, I wanted to ask or state that business records can sometimes contain sensitive information. And how did you deal with those sorts of matters?
Well, actually, it's there's a sensitive information that's on a number of levels. There's first there's personal information, and that is very well covered by, I mean, the French regulations on archives, and normally it's pretty respected actually and very understood by the public. Now there's other matters of state or company secrets, which link to processes or to a number of sensitive matters. And then there are the actual complicated subjects like World War II. World War II is a subject. I mean, so then I'm moving on to working for the SNCF, the train company, the national train company in France. I was hired in in 2006 as part of the process to try to present the archives of the company during World War II. Wow. And to the main difficulty being the accusations against SNCF for transporting people to concentration or assassination camps, which is exactly which is absolutely what happened, because they were the means of transportation. Now, some observers or some people have made the assertion that SNCF got money out of it. SNCF certainly hardly, I wouldn't say they didn't know who they were transporting, but they certainly didn't have a choice in the rolling stock they were putting at the disposal of the occupation forces. Right. And whatever those transports were, they were paid for the rolling stock put at the disposal. They certainly weren't paid for the content. And I mean, no document has ever surfaced saying that SNCF got money per person transported, right, whichever their status was. This was solved at the end of the day by the French government paying an indemnity to a number of descendants of the people who were assassinated. I still don't think, in a way, it proves a necessary guilt on the part of the transport company. That's these issues are so complicated.
Yes.
And but I am very ready to debate this if you have questions. Another very sensitive issue was when, and this happened in my second to last position when I was second in command at the French military archives in Vincennes. We were told that suddenly, because of the international terrorism threats around the world, we were to have a different policy on classified documents. Now, classified documents means documents that have been put under the seal of a secret, that are not to be revealed, right. Whose content are not to be revealed except to the people who have the right to know, whose need it is to know. So prior to this, we had a policy of opening up those classified archives after a 50-year period. And this was validated by the Secretariat for National Security at the French government level. In 2020, it was this, I mean, the same institution decided that we should stop opening archives this way. And suddenly we found ourselves in the position of reclosing military archives, some of which had been open to historians for decades. We had to do this under the provision that we should hire cohorts of temporary workers to put a seal of declassification on each of the documents. So we had to do that. We did that for a year. And then the government relented after the protest by a number of historians and archivist associations. And and the law was slightly changed, saying that a number of categories of documents would never be declassified, which makes little sense because and that administrations could come back to the archives after they had been transferred to the archives administrations and close them afterwards. Now, this requires means that do not exist. So it's just a text written that we know will never be applicable. So in a way, I think we came back to the original situation after 2 years of misery for historians, and that's I mean that's the people I feel most for, the historians who are in the middle of doctorates, and now doctorates are not the 10-year affair they used to be when we had doctorat de lettres. Now it's a 3 to 5 year affair, and when you just lose 2 years out of 3 to 5 years, how do you do? I mean, I'm sure universities were understanding, but still, this was a bad experience.
Yes, sir.
And but things have come back more or less to normal.
I wanted to ask you, when did you first sense a need to experience, I'll say, leadership roles in the archival community, and how did that manifest itself?
I was fortunate enough to join the business archives group within the Association of French Archivists in the around the time I joined RATP, and you know, it was an interesting period because business archivists were becoming more and more recognized within their respective companies, and they needed you know, to share professional experiences and to have people they could refer to within the profession. And that's how I started having a number of colleagues who were in touch with me, and then we developed this business archives group, of which I became the chair eventually. And from then on, based on this business archives role, I was elected president of the Association of French archivists, which is a 3-year term, and which time at that time we had the recognition of business archivists had kind of come into being, but we had to deal with the situation of local archivists who were local civil servants and who did not always have the proper recruitment conditions. So we worked on that and tried to unify the system within France to make sure they would get the same conditions of recruitment throughout France, because it's not because a status exists that it's evenly applied throughout the country. Especially there was a whole issue, and it's still going on in a way, as to which diplomas can be recognized for people to take the exam to qualify for assistant archivist or archivist in these local communities. So we worked on that, and that was quite successful. And and then we just organized events. I mean, and study days. Made sure all the sections. We have departmental, communal, national archivist sections, business archivists would develop and have their own activities, and that worked quite well with the general assembly and the colloquium held each year in the spring. So trying to organize them throughout France. Now the Association of French Archivists has developed. That was done in the 15 past years. Past 15 years, they organize every 3 years a forum of archivists, which is a good way of explaining what we do, both to share experiences between archivists, but also to have a few of our patrons, see what we do. And the administrations we work for, the historians who come and consult our data. I mean, so all this has been working quite well. But this was after me. So from then on, I went on to work for the International Council on Archives. Started in 2001, the Reykjavik Citra. Quite a memorable times, because that's when that was 2 weeks after 9/11, and wow. I remember the plane trips with our bags checked over and over, and but we still managed to gather a number of national archivists in Reykjavik, and from then on I represented the Association of French Archivists for most of the 2000s, and I was elected head of the section for professional associations, which represents the associations of which SAA is a member and has a regular representative. And then I moved on to the program around 2012, and 3 years later I took over the finances, which I followed from 2015 to 2022 when I left this role. The program is just trying to define the activities of ICA and giving contents. So there's both the dimension of having colleagues sharing their experience and trying to help colleagues from countries or from institutions with lesser means. We don't have much money. We are mainly funded by national archives. I think the budget structure is about €1 million a year, which is not that much actually, is 80% National Archives origin, and no, ICA is developing a number of actions, but it's still difficult to actually expand and to make sure more people come.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole question is, why will you join ICA when you have in your respective countries all the resources available? That's true of American archivists in a way. But I think there's a little extra in just joining ICA and really meeting with colleagues who have to deal with working in conditions of extreme poverty, conditions of war zones. I mean, all these are and these are the extreme subjects. But you also have institutions that just do not have the means to man their to recruit professional staff, and this is where ICA should come and try and help and organize as much training as possible, prepare manuals, and just try to share experiences, really. So that's
didn't they used to have a more robust training operation, if I'm not mistaken?
Well, actually, things were very active with Margaret Crockett, and Margaret Crockett has, I think, left the system. So I don't know where things are standing now. But Margaret Crockett is a wonderful professional and someone who's actually brought a lot, of her knowledge, experience, and expertise to ICA. And I worked with Margaret from the 2008 to when I left ICA 3 years ago. So it was an amazing time. No, really.
So where did your career take you at this point?
So after RATP and SNCF, I've already mentioned a little bit the Ministry of Defense, but the Ministry of Defense is an amazing institution. The archives. The defense is an amazing institution. It's your Pentagon, huh? But it's
right.
In France, the archives of the military administration date back to the reign of Louis XIV. So it was both foreign affairs and defense, affaires militaires, date back to then, because it was considered, it was one of the 4 secrétariats d'État, ministries set up by Louis XIV to run the affairs of state. And so the archives were organized from then on and were kept in various locations in Versailles up until the French Revolution, then all around Paris, and finally ended up in the Château de Vincennes in the late 19th, early 20th century, where other, I'm talking about the army there, but marine and of course air eventually joined them in that location over the course of the 20th century. These archives have always been well known and well identified by researchers. At the same time, the question of their location was always an ongoing subject. And it wasn't until the 1960s that they were all brought together to the same location, and not until 2005 that they were all joined in one single unit, one single service, yeah, wow. Service historique de la Défense. So it together with the Archives de la Gendarmerie. Gendarmerie is complicated, you know. Gendarmes are, how would you describe them? They in charge of police missions in mostly rural France, but they are part of the military. And they're part of the military, but they've been brought under the control of the Minister of the Interior in the past 15 years. So, but the archives stay with us. So that's at least their personnel files. So, I say with us, with the Service historique de la Défense. So, so the creation of this single unit was, of course, resisted by every single army. I mean, each force. It was also.
I would think there'd be a huge territorial instinct.
Absolutely, and plus the fact that they were put under the control. There was the added problem that they were put under the control of a civilian in 2015. So that added to the. So of course, what the army, especially the army, that had this sense of ownership, started recreating not an archive system, but at least his history unit, because what existed in these archival services was there were archivists and there were researchers who were recruited by the respective armies and forces and who would actually work for the ministry on developing studies for the ministry to better understand its its history from a strategic and general point of view of understanding. This evolved very well in the past 50 years. At first, you were supposed to basically tell the army everything it did was wonderful, and then they started recruiting university people. I mean, people who were who with doctorates, and then who would eventually, and this is what happened when I was there, who spent 3 or 6 years at the Service historique de la Défense, and then would go on to a university career, and so that's a system that exists nowadays, and in a way, the system still works. The difficulty that the Service historique de la Défense is meeting these days is that the location of the Château de Vincennes is very makes a lot of people want to be there, and in a way, the archives have been gradually kicked out from the place. We had 100 kilometers of archives that were located both in the old chateau and in the new military barracks that were next door. We've had to, I mean, the SHD had to evacuate half of its holdings and send them around France in the locations of the Service historique de la Défense, so making it much more difficult for researchers to.
Yes.
Everyone.
Well, and they become more vulnerable. The more they're moved as records, the more vulnerable they are to some degradation.
Absolutely. But no, we but it's, I mean, it was a wonderful experience working there, in spite of the classified archive story, and in spite of another story, which was linked to the name of a Saint-Cyr class. And a Saint-Cyr is the top-ranking class for the a school for training officers in the French army.
Mm.
In 2018, due to lack of security in the vetting system, I would say, a name was approved of a general who was a hero of World War I and World War II, but who sadly wrote terrible anti-Semitic pamphlets in the 1930s. And in a way, we did draw the attention of the chief of staff of the army that it could not be taken as a class name. We were told that it was already decided and everything was fine. And I suppose as a result, both my boss and myself were told to go and find jobs elsewhere. So it wasn't done as directly as that, but this was the result of the story.
Just highly political environment.
Yes, yeah.
Ouch.
Well, you know, in a way, it was done. It wasn't done too brutally, but it did happen. It did happen.
Yes. Yes.
I was actually, on the other hand, I was very fortunate to work for the. I have a few more minutes still to.
Yes, we do. We do.
I was very fortunate to work for the Préfecture de Police, the police department in Paris, and there we were able to bring to the forefront all the archives of the October 61 assassination of Algerian nationalists. I mean, you have to remember that the Paris of the pre-Evian agreement that ended the war in Algeria was a Paris of civil war. There were policemen assassinated every day, and there were of course Algerians killed, not in various ways. And the repression of that demonstration, probably it didn't kill 300 people, but there were at least 80 people who died as a result of police brutality, either being thrown into the Seine or so we opened the archives rather widely for that on that occasion. There was and we also were fortunate enough to open the archives explaining for World War II, explaining the arrest of Mishak Manouchian, the Armenian resistant who was arrested by the Nazis in 1943, and which started the whole campaign against the l'armée du crime by the occupation forces, and explaining that the French were, of course, defended by all those expatriates who had nothing to do in France. So not my words, but those of the Nazis at the origin of these of this affiche rouge. And so these archives show the terrible efficiency of the special forces at the Préfecture de Police in identifying this resistance group and slowly closing in on them, and then arresting them. So that's so Mishak Manouchian was put in the Pantheon a few months, last year, by Emmanuel Macron, who is very keen on finding such elements to exist. That was prior to his dissolution of the French Assembly, but I'm not going to start on French politics because it will get me going. And it's we are in a sad situation, but no more on this.
Well, but before we get to, we have a wonderful question by Matthew in the chat, but I want to ask you, Henri, tell us what you're doing today.
Oh, right now I'm head of the Society for the History of French Protestantism. And so we have a library in downtown Paris, in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, which has been there since the 1880s. And we try to gather a number of original sources of French Protestantism. We have normally all the works linked to French and international Protestantism available for researchers. And so it's a place to know, because you wait less than in big institutions if you want to have access to secondary material. We also have a peer-reviewed journal, the Revue d'Histoire du Protestantisme, which is published every trimester. We hold lectures, and I've been trying over the past year to bring the public to try and discover what Protestantism is about, what the history of French Protestantism is, both for the general public and for French Protestants, because there's still a lot of information to do on the subject. So we do that, and so it's I would say it occupies me about half my time. Yeah.
I believe it. And now you're even thinking of bigger outreach efforts and exhibition efforts.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
That's right. I mean, the idea is to try to actually present the resources that exist. We have some museums around France, some part of the Société de l'Histoire, some others not. We gather them in colloquia every year. The idea is to just have a network and present our resources much more widely. Now, something I haven't talked about at all, and I would not like you to think that I'm I'm an obsolete archivist. I mean, I've been working my whole career with the digital challenge. I mean, I've certainly helped decision makers understand that native digital is not the same thing as digitized documents. Because I mean, that's a common misconception. People, and especially in companies, they're deciding, but we can digitize all these documents and get rid of the originals and of course of the stacks and all the costs. It's not exactly the way it works. But I've also been working on, especially at Ministry of Defense, we set up a whole system for the whole Ministry of Defense called Archival, which was meant to deal with traditional and native digital documentation, to make sure that everything was covered in the production, in the documentary production of the ministry.
Excellent. I mean, who said the word retired? It doesn't exist. It doesn't. It's not even
no.
We can't even think about that. Sure. I'm going to ask my colleague Jennifer Donchev to introduce herself as a steering committee member and maybe read Matthew's question for us.
All right, thank you. My name is Jennifer Donchev. I'm the junior co-chair of the IAAS committee. And we have a message from Matthew, a question. And he asked, what was the role of archives during the French Revolution? Were they a part of the political ministry as government archives, or were they local to areas affected by the French Revolution? Were archives forced to choose sides in the French Revolution, or were they allowed to maintain autonomy and be independent? And then we have some comments. Elizabeth comments, the French archival system was created as a result of the revolution.
Yes, that's. Can I develop this a little bit? Yes, it's true that the National Archives was created. I mean, there was a very drastic view. There was something called the Bureau des Triages that took in all the archives of the old administrations of the monarchy, and they were sifted through, And the ones that were considered as representing the old order were often just destroyed without reference to their historical interests. So they were really just, if they reflected a view that was not sympathetic to the revolutionaries, they would disappear. So in a way, the National Archives were created in those conditions, and it took the archivists of the first half of the 19th century a whole effort to organize what was left from the work of this Bureau des Triages. So that's for the National Archives, and I'm summing things up very quickly, and it will. But in the departmental archives were created by the French Revolution, du Messidor en deux, no, Messidor en deux was the law on archives, and there was another the creation of the département a year later, and they've been in existence ever since, and they were, over the course of the 19th century, they were gradually put under the supervision of a professional. Professional at the time meaning a graduate from the Ecole des Chartes. But it took, I mean, I would say it wasn't until the 60s, the 1860s, that every département had an archiviste paléographe at its head. No, actually, researchers nowadays can actually undo the work of this Bureau des Triages by just spotting documents from in various series of the National Archives and trying to reconstruct the government archives coming from the monarchy. So it somehow was not respective of the provenance system, which hadn't been formulated. So it was really a system of keeping the information that was deemed necessary and useful.
Jennifer, we have another question. Would you like to read that one?
Yeah, we have one from Jamie. And please forgive my butchering of any French in these comments or questions. Can Monsieur Zuber comment on the impact on the reputation of French archivists as a result of the French television show Astrid et Raphael?
I'm sorry, but I do not know. I do not know that show. Is it a cop show? Is it?
Jamie, would you like
to?
Yes,
it is. It is. Okay, so I've heard of it, but I'm not sufficiently aware of what it says about the archives. One thing I have to say, and this is a great point of. And I don't know what the practice is in other countries. In the French system, we do not consider as part of police archives all the evidence, all the pièces à conviction that are being kept in police units. So they are not generally not transferred to because most of the time they are objects, and with. You will always find a few exceptions. Someone like mass murderers, like Landru, the documents will have been kept. But in general, it's not kept. And it's a debate I had with the present people in charge of creating the Museum for Terrorism, that you've heard there have been debates in France about keeping it. We are in strict financial difficulties in France, as you may know, and creating a museum is not obvious. So it had been announced 2 months ago that the Museum for Terrorism, that the team has been working on for years, would not be created. And luckily for them, it was just now the 10th anniversary of the terrible events we had in 2015 in Paris.
Yes,
so it was re-put back. I don't know with what money, but at least it's now back. And part of their collections are based on those evidence objects, pièces à conviction, that they have spotted for terrorism cases, and which have been kept in police archives. But usually these are documents that are not transferred to the archives.
It's so interesting, and I just want to thank folks for their questions. We have about 5 minutes before we have to close, but I want to make just a few announcements. And first of all, I want to make sure everyone knows that today's recorded installment will join past seminars, all of which can be viewed on SAA's YouTube channel and its IAAS Archival Landscapes playlist. The other IAAS program is Archival Vistas Briefings, where Landscapes focuses on differences in archival practices and traditions by location. Vistas Briefings takes a thematic approach, and this year's theme is archival standards and their applications and aspirations. Look for details soon about our next Vistas briefing, tentatively scheduled for mid-February. Am I correct, Jennifer?
Yeah, it's currently scheduled for February 27th.
Perfect. So pencil that in on your calendars. Do we know a time yet?
We have it scheduled now for 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So same.
Okay. So instead of pencil, use ink and put that in your calendar. And our next landscape seminar will feature Mr. Steve Urgola as we focus on Africa and specifically the archives of the American University of Cairo. And this is scheduled for March 17th. That time is yet to be determined, but I will make sure everyone knows those details as they become available. Are there any? We have about 3 minutes to ask further questions, if there are any at all from the audience.
We do have one from Brian in the chat.
Oh, excellent. I don't see that. Thank you, Jennifer.
And he asked, in popular parlance among those who aren't part of the information profession, is archivist as a title a professional title in France, or is it a term that can be ascribed to anyone who works with historical documents and records?
That's an extremely good question. Archivist is, I mean, we've been working at the Association of French Archivists to try to have it recognized as an actual job description. It is more and more, but I would say that it's still very often applied to anyone who works on on historical documents. So it's more and more taken into account, but and it's often still nowadays not considered as a top rank job, you know, in a way. You're an archivist, you're basically the person who just brings the boxes. And I mean, I would say this is not, it's less and less the case. You still have a few places where this is the way people react, yes. So there's still work to do in France, at least. in having
everywhere, I think,
the archivist position recognized in organizations. Yes.
Yes. Well, I want to recognize you, Monsieur Zuber, for your wonderful gift of information and your time and everyone's attention today. It's just been a wonderful hour. I can't believe how fast it goes by.
It was wonderful. I mean, presenting to you a few of my experiences, and over the years, I've worked with such pleasure with American colleagues. So it's really a great honor for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to stop recording. Let's see.